The Arizona sun hung high in the sky, relentless and unforgiving, turning the desert landscape into a shimmering sea of heat. Every rock, every cactus, and every scrubby bush seemed to radiate fire back at the earth. Amid this harsh landscape, a small boy ran as fast as his little legs could carry him, kicking up clouds of dust with each frantic step. His chest heaved, and tears streaked through the dirt smudged across his face. "Mommy! Mommy!" he screamed, his voice cracking with fear. The boy had been playing near a dry creek bed when he heard the shouts of strangers in the distance and realized he had been separated from his mother. Now, panic clawed at him like a wild animal. Through the heat haze, he finally saw her. She was tied to a large, jagged rock, her arms stretched out and bound with rough rope that had begun to chafe her wrists. Her head lolled slightly, her long dark hair plastered to her sweat-slicked face. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, and she looked around, clearly dizzy and weak from the sun. The boy's heart pounded in his chest. He had never seen his mother like this before, helpless, exposed, and alone. He ran faster, stumbling over rocks, nearly falling, but the thought of leaving her there kept him upright. Every step was agony, the sun beating down, baking the desert sand underfoot. The boy's throat burned from screaming her name, but he couldn't stop. He remembered what his father had told him: if you ever get lost or in danger, find help fast and don't give up. But this was worse than he had imagined. How could anyone have done this to his mother? His mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but fear and urgency drowned out all rational thought. Ahead, a narrow dirt road wound through the desert, a ribbon of hope cutting through the endless brown landscape. The boy ran toward it, waving his arms and shouting, praying someone, anyone, would see him. The wind carried his cries, rattling dry branches and kicking up a small cloud of dust that shimmered in the bright sunlight. He felt his legs trembling, his chest burning, but the sight of his mother, still tied and vulnerable, gave him the strength to push forward. As he approached the road, a cloud of dust in the distance revealed a lone figure on horseback. The boy squinted through the sun's glare, hope rising in his chest. The rider was moving steadily toward him, a cowboy by the looks of the wide-brimmed hat and worn leather boots. Could this stranger help his mother? The boy didn't wait to think. He ran straight toward the road, arms waving frantically, shouting louder than ever. "Please, help. My mommy is tied to a rock. She's in trouble." The cowboy reined in his horse, pulling up short, his eyes locking on the desperate boy. Instantly, he sensed the urgency, the raw fear in the child's voice. Dismounting with practiced ease, he approached carefully, scanning the desert until he saw the woman, her dark hair and tattered clothes stark against the pale rocks. The cowboy's hand went instinctively to the small knife at his belt. "Don't worry, son," he said calmly, though his mind raced. "We're going to get her out of there." The boy's eyes widened, relief flickering for the first time, though the danger was far from over. The cowboy's boots crunched against the dry desert dirt as he approached the boy, who was trembling and panting from fear and exertion. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face from the glaring sun, but his sharp eyes took in every detail: the frantic child, the tied woman, the harsh heat radiating off the rocks. "Easy there, son. I need you to stay calm," the cowboy said gently, crouching slightly so the boy could hear him over the wind. The boy pointed with a shaking finger toward the large rock where his mother struggled against. "The ropes. She's tied. Please help her," he cried. The cowboy followed the boy's pointing hand and froze for a moment. The sight of the Apache woman struggling under the unforgiving sun sent a rush of urgency through him. Her arms were red and chafed where the ropes had bitten into her skin. Sweat ran down her face, her chest rising and falling with shallow, strained breaths. The cowboy's instincts kicked in immediately. He knew he had to act fast. The desert sun could turn a desperate situation deadly in minutes. "Stay with me," the cowboy said, keeping his voice calm so the boy wouldn't panic further. He knelt beside the rock, pulling the small, sturdy knife from his belt. The knots were rough and crude, tied by someone who had no skill but plenty of malice. He examined them carefully. If he pulled too hard or cut in the wrong spot, the rope could tighten, hurting her even more. With practiced hands, he started working on the ropes, one careful slice at a time. The boy watched anxiously, biting his lip, his small hands fidgeting in worry. He could hear the woman's shallow breathing, feel the sweat dripping from her hair onto the rocks. "Hold still, ma'am," the cowboy said, his voice steady. "I've got you. You're going to be free in a minute." The woman blinked weakly, her eyes filled with exhaustion and pain, but also with a flicker of hope. She tried to smile faintly at her son, and he felt a tiny spark of relief. Minutes felt like hours as the cowboy worked, tugging and cutting with precise movements. Each rope that fell away seemed to release a little of the tension in the boy's chest. Finally, the last rope snapped under the knife's edge. The woman slumped forward, exhausted, and the cowboy caught her, easing her gently to the ground. He shielded her from the sun as best as he could, using his wide hat to provide shade. "You're safe now," he reassured her. The boy ran forward, throwing his arms around his mother. "Mommy, Mommy, I was so scared," he cried, clinging tightly to her. She hugged him back as tears streamed down her face, the pain of the past ordeal mixing with relief and gratitude. The cowboy stepped back, scanning the horizon to make sure no other danger lingered. "You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you now," he said. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, the harsh sun still beating down, but at least for now, the immediate danger was gone. The woman whispered a faint, "Thank you," her voice hoarse, while the boy held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. The cowboy gave a small nod, knowing the real challenge was not just freeing her, but getting them somewhere safe. With care, he helped them toward the shade of a nearby mesquite tree, where the air was a little cooler and relief a little sweeter. Under the sparse shade of the mesquite tree, the Apache woman sank to the ground, her body trembling from exhaustion, sunburn, and fear. The boy knelt beside her, clutching her hand tightly, his small frame shaking but relieved that she was finally free. The cowboy crouched nearby, keeping a careful eye on the surrounding desert. The sun still blazed overhead, relentless, but beneath the tree, there was a small pocket of relief. He handed the woman a canteen, and she took a few trembling sips, savoring the cool water as it soothed her parched throat and burned lips. Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind. Her dark eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and lingering fear. The boy hugged her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. "Mommy, you're okay now. We're safe," he murmured, trying to reassure both her and himself. The cowboy watched them silently, feeling the tension in his chest ease a little. He was glad they were alive, but he knew the danger wasn't entirely over until they were somewhere safe, sheltered from the scorching sun and potential threats. "Can you walk?" the cowboy asked gently, his tone steady and calm. The woman nodded weakly, testing her weight as she pushed herself upright. Every movement sent a shiver through her muscles, stiff from being tied for so long. The boy's small hand gripped hers tightly as he helped her steady herself. The cowboy scanned the horizon again, looking for any signs of whoever had left them there. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, an unforgiving sea of sand, rocks, and scrub. It was easy for danger to approach unnoticed, but for now, the immediate threat had vanished. He offered them guidance, pointing toward a nearby ranch visible over the dunes, a place where they could find shelter, water, and perhaps food. Step by step, the woman and her son followed him, their pace slow but steady. The cowboy stayed beside them, occasionally shading their faces with his wide-brimmed hat as the sun climbed higher. The boy looked up at him, eyes filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Mister, thank you," he said softly, voice full of sincerity. The cowboy gave a small nod, his face calm and resolute. As they neared the ranch, a few neighbors came into view, drawn by the dust cloud and the boy's earlier cries. Seeing the woman and child, their eyes widened in shock and concern. Blankets and cold water were quickly brought out. The woman sank gratefully into the shade, holding her son close, whispering soft reassurances as he shivered from exhaustion and fear. The cowboy stood back, letting the neighbors take over, knowing that their care would be more thorough and lasting. Finally, as the boy leaned against his mother, exhausted but safe, he felt the tension of the past ordeal slowly leave him. The sun still blazed overhead, but for the first time in hours, there was a sense of calm. They were alive, they were together, and, for now, they were safe. The cowboy watched quietly, satisfied that he had done what he could, knowing that sometimes, courage and quick action were the difference between life and death. By the time the cowboy, the woman, and her son reached the ranch, the sun had climbed higher, scorching the desert even more fiercely. Yet inside the small cluster of buildings and under the shade of a few scattered trees, the air felt cooler, calmer, a safe haven from the relentless heat and danger outside. Neighbors came out at the sight of the trio, bringing blankets, jugs of water, and cool cloths to help soothe the burns and fatigue that the woman had suffered. The boy ran ahead, still clinging tightly to his mother's hand, but his pace had slowed as exhaustion began to set in. The Apache woman sank gratefully onto a shaded bench, holding her son close. She whispered soft reassurances, rubbing his back and murmuring promises that they were finally safe. The cowboy knelt nearby, carefully adjusting a cool cloth on her sunburned shoulders. "You're going to be okay," he said gently, his tone calm but firm. She looked up at him, eyes glistening with gratitude, a faint smile forming despite her exhaustion. The boy glanced at the cowboy as well, his small face glowing with awe. "Thank you, mister," he said softly. The neighbors brought extra blankets and a basin of water, allowing the woman to wash some of the dust and sweat from her face. The cowboy helped her steady herself, making sure she didn't overexert her weakened body. The boy leaned against her, tired but relieved, his small arms still wrapped around her. It had been hours since they were left in the desert, hours filled with fear and uncertainty, and now it felt surreal to finally be somewhere safe. As the sun began to descend slightly in the western sky, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange, the woman told the cowboy her story, haltingly and quietly. She had been captured by strangers while traveling near a remote canyon, left to bake in the sun as they disappeared into the wilderness. She had no idea how long she had been tied to the rock, only that her strength was fading fast. The cowboy listened silently, nodding, offering her words of comfort without pressing too many questions. For now, she just needed rest and the reassurance that she and her son were safe. The boy yawned, his small body leaning against his mother. The woman wrapped her arms around him tightly, holding him close as the tension and fear began to drain from both their bodies. The cowboy stood back, tipping his hat to the neighbors who were helping, and gave the family a small, humble smile. He didn't need praise, saving them had been its own reward. As the golden light of the setting sun spilled across the ranch, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, sometimes courage, quick thinking, and a willingness to act made all the difference between life and death. Finally, the woman whispered to her son, her voice now steady, "We're safe. We're together. Nothing can hurt us now." The boy's eyes closed, and he drifted into sleep in his mother's arms. The cowboy mounted his horse again, tipping his hat one last time, knowing his job was done. Outside the ranch, the desert still burned bright, but inside, there was warmth, safety, and the unshakable comfort of family reunited. Their ordeal had ended, and a new day of hope was beginning.